Hi, and welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. And on this episode, I am joined by Nicole McNellis, and we are talking about mom rage. This is such an important topic and something that a lot of people experience. Not enough people are talking about it. And while, yeah, we're getting more and more real about the challenges of motherhood and new motherhood, this is one of those things that still has a lot of shame and stigma attached to it, that we're not supposed to feel rage, not supposed to feel anger. And that's just not the truth. We do. And so we're going to get into it and help you all understand more about what mom rage is, how it can show up, why it shows up, and what can be done. My guest, Nicole McNellis, is a licensed mental health therapist, perinatal mental health counseling specialist, and the founder of an award-winning counseling practice in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Nicole's been featured as a mental health expert in print publications, online media, books, and podcasts, and serves as a subject matter expert and conference presenter for Postpartum Support International. And she has presented on this topic at a Postpartum Support International conference, and it was so well attended that the room was just bursting wide open with people. Actually, a lot of people couldn't even fit in there because so many people attended this. And that tells you a little bit about how important this topic is. So let's dive in and learn more about maternal rage with Nicole McNellis. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really glad that we're talking about this topic, maternal rage, mom rage, whatever it is that people have heard or felt. As soon as you hear that, if you have felt it before, you know what it is, even if you haven't quite put your finger on it before. So I'm happy to kind of get into all of this so people can really understand what it is they're experiencing. So we'll start there. What is maternal rage?
So, maternal rage is this very specific experience of rage that is tied directly to motherhood and someone's experience of motherhood, right? And along with that very specific anger, so it's not goal directed, right? It can feel, and it's really intense, and it's usually derived from feelings of powerlessness, injustice, and stress, right? So it's this perfect storm of all of these things coming together, and then there's this explosion of anger.
Right. So there's when we put the word mom and rage together, the next thing that comes is you're not supposed to feel angry or some kind of stigma against the idea that moms being anything, whatever, perfectly happy and content and living their best life. But that's not the case, obviously. A lot of people experience mom rage. What do you think the amount? I know there's not a specific number yet that we can point to, but what are your guesstimates about like how many people really experience this?
I honestly feel like it's 100%. I feel, and we both do this work as clinicians. I would be hard pressed to find a mom that I worked with that didn't have the experience of mom rage at some point. And you make such a good point that because of the cultural expectations that are placed on mothers, that a happy mother equals a good mother, that mothers need to be calm and collected and gentle all of the time, which no one is calm and collected and gentle all of the time.
No.
But we had that completely unrealistic and nonsensical, honestly, and harmful
Mhm.
expectations for mothers. And then those expectations actually play directly into this experience of mom rage. So it all goes together and then it all adds up to this perfect storm and then this explosion of rage and anger.
So it's really interesting the kind of three components or main components that you said go into this: powerlessness, injustice, and stress. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, starting with the injustice? What do you mean by that?
When we're thinking about injustice, it's this idea that something is not fair, right? That I am not experiencing something as justified. And what's interesting about actually all three of those components is that we can experience those components both on a global and systemic scale and also individually in our households and internally. So, in terms of injustice, we can think of someone might be experiencing injustice systemically in the world. They may be concerned about world events or they may be experiencing injustice in their workplace, right? So, that's on a systemic scale. And then within their household, they may feel like there's injustice and things aren't fair. Like the division of labor may not be split in a way that's equitably, or nobody's noticing all of the invisible labor that they do in the background. That's injustice. And then we have powerlessness. So, powerlessness is when someone feels like their agency has been stripped from them, and that situation, no matter what they do, situations are out of their control. And that's a horrible feeling. And again, somebody can feel that way within the systems that they're in. So they can feel that way just within the world, that no matter what they do, it doesn't matter and bad things are going to happen. They can feel that way within their family and at their household, that they have no control over things. And then they can feel that way internally, like whatever they do just doesn't matter. They don't have control over anything. That's powerlessness. And then stress is the stress that we feel as moms all of the time. The stress of the way that I frequently put it to clients is the stress of trying to do it all the time. Because again, that's frequently the expectations for mothers, is that we're going to do all the things all the time and we're going to do it perfectly and we're going to do it with a smile on our face. And clearly that can obviously bring someone to feel a whole lot of stress because of everything they're trying to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. it is so much pressure, and we have, I think, just in general, the least amount of help ever. Certainly that was true through COVID, but there's so many factors that go into this. Like, what were some of the things that first got you interested in mom rage?
So I like to think that mom rage found me, as it
Yeah.
finds so many of us. But I really noticed it, and it really came more to my attention during the pandemic, both personally and professionally.
Mhm.
So professionally, I was starting to hear the term maternal rage and mom rage on social media. I was starting to read about it more. There was a really great article in the New York Times by an author named Minna Dubin, where she talks about it's the rage that mothers don't talk about. That was published right at the very beginning of the pandemic. And that article was really reflecting what so many of us were feeling personally, right?
Right.
So for me, I had a grade school child and a preschool child. So both of my children were essentially out of the house and at school for most of the day pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
I have my practice, and my partner works outside of the home most of the time, doesn't work at home. So really, I had a hybrid schedule, which was lovely. So I work at home part-time and I worked in my office part-time seeing clients. And I had really gotten to this place in parenthood and in motherhood where I had a little bit of freedom. I
Mhm.
had a little
Mhm.
bit more flexibility to my schedule. I didn't have toddlers clinging to me and doing the things that toddlers do so
Right.
much of the time.
Right.
And we had really, as a family, made it to this sweet spot in parenting. And then all of a sudden, that whole world came crashing down on us.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, on a random Monday afternoon, I wasn't the only one at home. Suddenly, I had a first grader who was trying to do online school, which a first grader
Oh
is
no.
not capable of doing
No.
online school.
Yeah.
I had a preschooler who we, as parents, were trying to, I guess you could call it homeschooling. I don't know. We just went to Target and bought a bunch of workbooks
Okay.
and honestly hoped for the best.
Yeah.
We were really just trying to keep him occupied while the older one was doing his online school. And then my partner and I were trying to do like work, like our
Right.
paid work.
Right.
We both have, I'm seeing clients in sessions. He has a job where he has a lot of meetings. And so we were doing this like wild tag team thing where one of us was in a meeting. And so the other one was doing childcare. And then the other one was trying to get a meal. It was chaos and
Yeah.
it felt
For sure.
awful. And the thing that I think, because unbelievably it was 5 years ago, that so many of us forget, and I have to remind myself, in addition to just that general chaos in the household, it was really scary. Like
Yeah.
it was like actually terrifying,
Hmm.
but health-wise and from a like safety perspective. So as parents, one of our biggest jobs is to protect our children and keep them safe.
Yeah.
So talk about powerlessness.
Yeah.
We didn't know much about this virus. We didn't know a whole lot about how you could protect yourself, how you could catch. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there. It was hard to figure out what information was correct. It was terrifying. The information was changing because scientists were learning different things as we were going. We live in a major metropolitan area outside of Philadelphia. The hospitals were full. It
Right.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
And to not be able to feel like being able to keep your child safe is so out of your control
Mm.
is an
Hmm.
awful feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, especially considering those three things we just talked about, powerlessness, injustice, and stress, all
Right.
of those things really came to the forefront. And during that time. And so I was noticing that I was just more on edge, right?
For
That
sure.
things that I could
Yeah.
normally handle, suddenly I felt like I couldn't handle anymore
Mm,
because my whole system was just taken to the limits of what it could
no
possibly
doubt.
manage
Yeah.
as a parent and then also in working with my clients, right? It's unusual for us in this work that we do to be in the thick of it when our clients are in the thick of it. We're actually very smartly advised not to do that, right? And but there was no choice at that point. It was like
Yeah.
we're all dealing
True.
with this pandemic together and then we're trying to help our clients through it. And so I was noticing, yeah, that I was snapping a little more, that this anger was coming up for me more, and then I was seeing it reflected in my clients and also in the greater culture. And so that is how I really got interested in mom rage. And I'm a doer. So I was noticing
Hmm.
this coming up and my clients were asking for help, right? As clients do when they're
Of
when they're
course.
coming to therapy, they're saying, this is coming up for me. What do I do? And so I really started putting together, like cobbling together any resources that I could for my clients, but also for me, because I
Hmm.
was using those resources
Nice.
and those strategies also. And so that was really my introduction to mom rage. And what's happened since then is I've started to do therapist education on mom rage also, in addition to working with my clients on mom rage. I was
Hmm.
realizing there's not a ton of academic research on this topic. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of
Yeah.
trainings for therapists on
Hmm.
this topic. And so, again, as somebody who is a doer and feels like, oh, if this is missing, maybe there's something I could do about it. Maybe I
For
could
sure.
fill this void. I created a training for therapists and for those in the helping professions on mom rage because I thought we really, like we were just saying, there's probably 100% of moms that have experienced this once. We need to learn how to help our clients with this as clinicians. And
Hmm.
so that's really where I am now. So it's really been very full circle from experiencing it myself to trying to help my clients with it to now educating therapists about how to help their clients with
For
it. So
sure.
it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, and so necessary. I know a lot of people have gravitated to you for this reason because it resonates with so many people. And obviously, because the need is great, it's just impacting so many people. And I'm curious, back when I was first postpartum, like 15 years ago or so, I had, for sure, I had mom rage. I had that rage. I was also depressed and anxious and experiencing OCD, and I didn't know any of it. Like, even as a therapist,
Yep.
working in the field, I did not know what was going on for me. But the sort of, again, I know there's not like a ton of research, like you said, but I imagine the correlation of depression and anxiety with rage is pretty strong. I assume you can have rage without being depressed or anxious, but man, if you're depressed and anxious, it just has to be. It was already so intense for me. And then to experience rage on top of that or in combination with it just felt so horrible. Absolutely horrible. Do you see that the more, I guess, depression or anxiety that's around, the more likely rages to also happen?
Yeah, so you got it exactly right. So in the research that we do have, what you just walked us through is exactly what we're seeing. So mom rage can exist on its own
Mm-hmm.
as its own issue,
Mm-hmm.
or it can actually be a symptom of and experienced along with
Mm-hmm.
issues like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety
Mm-hmm.
because all of the factors that lead to mom rage are there, right? Again, this powerlessness, injustice, and stress that then lead to feelings of overwhelm and overstimulation. And then that's where you get the mom rage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're already experiencing depression and anxiety, your system is already overwhelmed. Your system is
Yeah.
already at capacity. And then so any little thing can then feel, okay, this is the thing that then sets this off, right? I was in session with a client and listening to her experience of mom rage, and I reflected back to her as we do. And I said to her, it sounds like you're exploding and drowning at the same time.
Mm.
And
Oh
that really
my gosh,
and
for
that really
sure.
so the face that she made was
Mm-hmm.
similar to the face like that. It's one of those moments she gasped, and it was clear that really resonated with her. So I've been using that ever since because that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it feels like. You're both drowning and
Mm-hmm.
exploding at the same time. Like
Mm-hmm.
your system is literally at capacity and just cannot take anymore. And then that's where mom rage comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's a warning signal. It's a signal that this
Yeah.
is a system that cannot take anymore. There's a problem in the system that we need to take care of this mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really where I go with mom rage. And that's where the research tells us to go is we need to look at mom rage as a catalyst for change. It's a message, right? It's not a meltdown. It is your mind and your body sending a message that we are not being cared for,
Right.
that there is a problem in the greater system, and your body and your mind is now saying, nope, we can't do anymore. We are at capacity, and that's where the drowning and exploding comes in.
Oh man, that really encapsulates it so well. And it's for me in my memory of it, whatever, 15 years ago, and then maybe a lighter version of it with my second about 12 years ago. I remember those moments because of how intense they were and how shocking they were. Like it felt so out of place for me to have that level of intensity. And I felt the powerlessness. I felt the stress. I felt, yeah, that injustice feeling. And the level of intensity that I experienced it was like so much that I could punch a hole straight through a wall like easily. Like I felt like I was hulking out in a way.
Mhm.
Just it was so big. And then immediately after whatever all of that was that passed, then I went into this shame spiral because what kind of a mom, who does that, why do I, like all of those things just flooded in right after, which of course contributed more to feeling depressed and anxious and blah blah blah. Is that, I
Yep.
assume that's what you see too.
That's exactly right. And that is also reflected in the scholarly research, right? There is absolutely a cycle that is associated with mom rage. And part of that cycle is this guilt and shame. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, what happens when someone experiences guilt and shame after they experience mom rage is they're then less likely to reach out for
Mm-hmm.
help
Mm-hmm.
because they feel so awful. They feel like, what kind of mom am I to
Mm-hmm.
be experiencing this, to have yelled at my children? And so then because they get less help, then it starts the cycle, or because they're not reaching out for help or not sharing with anyone that this is what they're experiencing, that
Mm-hmm.
cycle then starts all over again. When we hold these feelings of guilt and shame in, it then
Yeah.
builds, right? And then we start the cycle, unfortunately, all over again. And so that is one of the reasons that I have really worked so hard to do therapist education around mom rage, is because this is our opportunity to help clients break that cycle, because it is a cycle that can be broken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important to that therapeutic relationship can be part of the catalyst for positive change, right? If you have a
Right.
strong relationship with your therapist, or if you find a therapist
Mm-hmm.
who knows what they're doing in terms of perinatal mental health and in terms of mom rage, you can then really move to, you can start, it's a different, you can start a different cycle, right? You can go down a
Right.
different path, right? So instead
Right.
of feeling that shame and guilt, you start to recognize like, oh, there's a reason that this
Mm-hmm.
rage is coming up, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a me problem. This is an environmental problem.
Right.
And now I can do something different, right? And just that acknowledgement I find with clients in recognizing that, oh, this isn't random. Like this
Mm-hmm.
rage is coming up for a reason. It is purposeful, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
trying to tell me something. Just the relief that gives clients, that in and of itself is an intervention, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I always start with clients. And we can get into it. I take a two-pronged approach when we're looking at what strategies can we use to help moms with this.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the prongs is we have to look at what's happening in the environment, and we
Yeah.
have to acknowledge that for the clients that we're working with, is that this isn't random. This is not irrational. In fact, this is a very rational, this rage is a rational response to what you're experiencing it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how we're going to work with this, right? We're not going to act like
Right.
this just came out of nowhere.
Right.
And because it didn't, it
Right. No.
absolutely didn't. It is, in fact, there's like a straight line from what you're experiencing to what's going
Right.
on in your
Right.
environment.
I wonder because like I was saying before, just using my personal experience, I knew I felt things very intensely, but I wouldn't have necessarily known at the time that, oh, other people experience this, other moms feel this, or two, that it was connected. I could say, oh, yeah, this, I feel alone, or I feel like I'm doing too much, or I could name things in my environment. But I'm thinking, what are some things that you've heard from people, ways that rage has shown up so that other people might be able to recognize, like, ooh, maybe that's me too?
Yeah, so there's frequently that cycle that we were talking about. There's frequently a buildup, there's an explosion, there's a release, and then there's an aftermath, right? So this is an example of like that. This could be an example of something that could happen, right? So it is a day that you are working outside of the home, right? In addition to all of the unpaid work that you do as a mother inside the home,
Yeah.
and you're the one responsible for getting the kids off to school that day. So you're getting all your stuff ready to get out of the house. You're trying to get all the kids' stuff ready. And then your toddler decides that they are not going to put on their shoes. That is just where they're at today. And so you're doing the best you can, again, to get everybody out the door, get them in the car, and get them where they need to go. And you're feeling all of this pressure, right? You're feeling that buildup. Like, I got to get to work on time. This is my paid work, right? That's how I support my family financially, right? And there's already that pressure of, oh, I'm a mom, so they are already probably thinking that I'm distracted and that I don't give 100% at work, where usually moms are giving more than they absolutely have in all of the environments that they're in.
That's true.
So all of that, right? So that's what's going on in the background. That's the buildup. And then the explosion is you just start screaming because the toddler is not putting on their freaking shoes, right? And so that's the explosion. And then the toddler finally listens, gets their shoes on, you get everybody in the car, and you are driving to daycare, and that is when you start feeling horrible. That's the aftermath, right? And so that is the cycle that we need to recognize. Now, where change can come in is after the aftermath, if you will,
Mm.
right? You can hold all of this in that's just happened, or you can choose to share it with someone, or you can recognize for yourself, like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to put in some strategies and some interventions, and to recognize, wait, why is this happening? This is happening because maybe there was too much expected of me this morning.
Right.
Maybe there is a partner who could be more involved in getting the kids out the door or completely take that labor on. Maybe there's a different way to get things done in the morning, so that maybe we have to leave more time, right? Maybe we need a half an hour for the toddler to get their shoes on, right? We
Yeah.
have to look fully at what's going on. Maybe you get up a little bit before the kids and have a little bit of time for yourself so that you can regulate your system a little bit, right? But we want to look at both individual strategies and also system strategies,
Mhm.
right? Because if we're just looking at individual strategies, then those strategies usually burn out, right? They're not
Right.
sustainable. They don't work in the long run, because
Right.
this isn't an individual problem, right? This is a response, again, to something that's happening in the environment. So it's really important to acknowledge that and to work with both the individual, because individual strategies can be helpful, but we also need system strategies and environmental strategies too.
I don't think that can be underscored enough because, and maybe again, this is societal, maybe in particular in Western culture, United States, but the amount of aloneness that there is just doing this job on your own because of, right, somebody has to go back to work or support lives far away. We, I think, have developed in some way to feel like we're supposed to be able to do all of this all on our own. And I'm sure you hear that all the time, that like from moms, I'm supposed to be able to do, I should be able to do all of this, but man, we're not supposed to. It's farthest from the
Right.
truth. So, of course, if you start to feel rage, you're going to blame yourself for that too.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. No, we're not designed to do this alone, to parent, to mother alone. And yet we live in a system that constantly forces us
Mm-hmm.
to, right? Like when we really widen the lens, things like policy changes would actually make a really big difference for issues like mom rage, and probably for many other, right, issues. But things like paid leave, right? Things like closing the gender wage gap, right? All of these types of things would make, because it would take, oh, access to affordable childcare,
Oh,
better
right.
access to healthcare,
Of
right?
course.
All of these things would make a difference because they would alleviate some of that stress that we were talking about, right? So
Yeah.
if you're constantly under pressure from the system that you're
Yeah.
living in,
Yeah.
and then under pressure personally, right? Of course, there's going to be this like grand explosion, right? And then because we're not fixing the root causes, it's happening over and over again, which is why at least acknowledging those root causes, right? And acknowledging what's happening in the greater environment really make a big difference for moms. And we can, and it's funny, I laugh at this, but I frequent when I'm talking to colleagues and other therapists about mom rage, one of the things they say is, none of my clients has ever come to me and said, I really want to work at the system level. I really want to advocate for paid leave because that's what's going to help with my mom rage, right?
Yeah.
No, what they come to me and say is the things that you were saying, Kat, is they say things like, I feel like a horrible mom. I can't believe I yelled
Mhm.
at my kid. They just didn't eat the dinner I made them. Like, who cares? And now I
Mhm.
feel horrible because this is not supposed to be a big deal, but it felt like a big deal. And I don't feel like I have any other options. And I'm so exhausted and I can't believe I'm this angry and there's something wrong with me. That's what I hear, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where we start. And
Mhm.
then we start there at the individual level, and then I call it widening the lens, right? And then we have to look
Mhm.
wider than that at what's
Yeah.
happening in the greater system. And I actually learned this in a postpartum support international training many years ago, where one of the trainers talked about it is important to recognize when you're in a season of giving and a season of receiving, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I think is so important about that, when I remind my clients about there, is I'm going to give you individual strategies to help you with this, right? And then if you want to, right, then we're going to widen the lens a little bit and look at the system, but at least we're going to acknowledge the system. But then someone like me who now has older children, I have my own practice, so I create my own schedule and I have a little bit of flexibility. I can now actually do things like advocating for paid leave at the state and
Yeah.
federal level. And that is because I am in the season of giving
Mhm.
now. And
Mhm.
it's important to recognize what season we're in. And then the interventions and strategies can be customized, right,
Yeah.
to that season. That is really important. I could not have done legislative advocacy 10 years ago when I had
Right.
a toddler and a baby. Like that would,
Right.
there's no way. Like I just didn't have the time or the energy or the wherewithal to do something like that.
Yeah.
But now I can. And so I do. And honestly, working at the system level helps me with not only with my own mom rage, but it helps
Mhm.
me to learn more about these systemic issues and I'm hoping that it helps at the system level in general. But really, we have to look at what's most helpful for the client, what's most helpful for the mom who is struggling with this. And there are ways to make things better, but again, recognizing we have to start with where is this coming from, and then we match up the interventions and the strategies to that.
For sure. And thinking about just newly postpartum, or at least in those first several months, sleep has to be a factor here.
Yep.
That without an infant, if I don't get enough sleep for a couple of days in a row, I'm more irritable, not the easiest to be around, and more likely to be snappy, all that stuff. So, layered in to all of the things you've already talked about, being deprived of sleep, just that's like pouring fuel on the fire.
Yep. So sleep deprivation is absolutely at the top of the list when it comes to factors that
Yeah.
contribute to mom rage. In the academic literature, there are two really broad factors that they look at and that they name in terms of what contributes to mom rage. And those are
Mhm.
compromised needs and violated expectations.
Right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about sleep deprivation, it can actually fall into both of those categories.
Mhm.
It's an unmet need
Yep.
physiologically,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And even though most of us know going into parenting and going into postpartum that we're going to get less sleep, I will speak for myself. I didn't realize just how little sleep I
Right.
was going to get. And not only that, what we also know from the research is that interrupted sleep is brutal. It's
Yeah.
brutal. So
Yeah.
even if you're lucky, 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night, if you're waking up every 1 to 2 hours to feed a newborn or an infant, that interrupted sleep doesn't give you like the really good restful sleep that your
Right.
body actually needs. And so we have the unmet physiological need with sleep deprivation, and then we have this violated expectation. Like I thought I could I pulled all-nighters in college. I thought I could I
Right.
thought I
Right.
could but then I slept probably the whole
Oh, for
next day.
sure. Yeah.
You can't do that when you have a newborn, and especially if, because there's no paid leave and all this other nonsense, and you're doing it on your own,
Hmm.
essentially. And so when we have that combination of unmet needs and violated expectations, again, we get started with that cycle, right? That then leads to the
Yeah.
explosion because someone is literally so deprived of what they need that they can't function, that they
Hmm.
cannot function. That's where mom rage comes in. It's like, your body and your mind can no longer function. And then this is what we get.
Yeah, that is really real. That not being able to function feeling, oh my gosh, and then you still have to somehow. There's so much pressure, so much pressure. But yeah, at some point, you'll be so burnt out that, yeah, you might feel rageful for sure. And then you might just be in a puddle of tears also. It's really draining. Those two factors that you said are really important. What are other ways that like expectations are not met that you see?
Sure. So another one that comes up is the expectation that labor around the household, the things that need to be done to keep a household running when you have children and when you have a partner, that labor, this is actually probably the one I see most often, that labor is going to be split equitably. When that expectation is not met, and when that expectation is not met over and over again, and when the labor that a mother is, the unpaid labor that a mother is specifically engaging in. So, all of the invisible labor, the
Mm-hmm.
mental load, all of that stuff that happens in the background to
Mm-hmm.
keep a family healthy and alive, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Moving
Just
along. Yeah.
surviving, right? When that is not acknowledged or appreciated, and then again, when that is not split in a way that is equitable, so much resentment then builds, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
is that those expectations are not met. Then you have a mom who is burned out, who is drained, right? Who's feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated, who's feeling powerless because nothing that she does within her household makes nobody listens to her, nobody's recognizing all
Mm-hmm.
of the things that she does. That is one that comes up all of the time. And that is a really tough one because again, it's a small system issue, right? It's the within your household issue. And so there's strategies that I give clients to work with that. But then the thing that I keep coming back to is your partner needs to show up, right? You are
Mm-hmm.
hurting and you need a partner who recognizes that you are hurting and who's going to decide to show up differently. And
Right.
then I would also argue that it's a small system issue, but it's also a big system issue because, like you've mentioned, we have these absolutely absurd expectations for mothers that they're just going to do all of the things all of the time and be happy about it.
Yeah. No.
And that's harmful, right? It's even in the language that we use. Like we will say things, or clients will say things, and I've had to change my own language around this. Oh, my partner is really helpful, or
Mm.
I ask
Right.
him for help. It's, I don't know, these kids are his.
Right.
This
Yeah.
house is his.
Right.
He's not babysitting these children.
Yeah.
He's not helping me with dinner. He
Right.
needs to eat too. So I have changed my own language and I've taught my clients to change my language. Ask your part, what are you choosing to participate in? How
Mm-hmm.
are you choosing to show up? This is how I'm
Mm-hmm.
choosing to show up. What are you
Mm-hmm.
choosing to do? And that may sound a little more confrontational than most people are comfortable with. But that is, again, you want to customize it to your level of comfort. But
Right.
really, we have to change our language around that. Because if we are, as moms, if we are asking for help, that means then that we're the household manager, right?
No doubt.
We're the
Yep.
default parent. And so even the language that we use, right, leads to all
Mm-hmm.
of contributes to what we're experiencing. And so that's really important. And I highly recommend couples therapy for that
Right.
if needed. But there's also other great resources like the Fair Play system, where there's that whole, it's a book and then it's this whole system that really talks about equitable division of labor. I use that quite a bit as a resource because that whole system is really about looking at how, first of all, we have to recognize the invisible labor that's happening, and then we have to figure out how to split it in a way that makes more sense for
Mm-hmm.
our family, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is a lot to feel as a human and to try and figure out what are some of the things that you are helping people do or understand to help them move through this.
So I think taking a two-pronged approach is really what is important here, right? So
Right.
the first thing that we want to do when working with clients, or if you're experiencing mom rage yourself, is first we need to look at what's happening in your environment, right? We need to, even if we can't change what's happening in the environment, we need to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So that could be saying, hey, the world in general feels really stressful right now. My workplace feels really stressful right now. My relationship with my partner is struggling right now. My relationship with my parents is struggling. There's things going on in our family system that are really hard.
Right.
So that's the first thing we want to do is we want to take this global perspective and say, hey, what's going on in the environment? Let's at least acknowledge that even if we can't change any of those things, we have to at least be able to say, hey, this is what's happening that is contributing to this issue of mom rage. So that's the first step. And then the next step is that's where we put in individual strategies and interventions. So we want to use those individual strategies in the context of what's going on in the environment. And we want to really look at what is a client's strengths? What is someone's strengths, right? Like where we don't want to add more to someone's already very full to-do list.
Right.
So we want to look at where does a client already work? And then we want to put in strategies and interventions that complement that. So something that I find works really well for clients, and then we also see this in the research, because of all of the shame and guilt that is associated with mom rage, there's a cognitive strategy called self-compassion that I'm sure you're very familiar with, Kat, that can really work so well in this situation. And so there's a specific exercise that I use with clients where I say, if you have a good friend of yours who is coming to you and telling you about their experience of mom rage, what is your response to them? You're not going to say to them like, oh, you're a bad mom because you yelled at your kids because they were late for the bus and now they're making you late for work because you have to drive them to school. You would say, I know my kids did the same thing. They just did this yesterday and I yelled at my kids too. This is so hard. This is so stressful. I'm so glad that we can talk about this to get all of those things, right? That's compassion. That is compassion that we so freely give to others. So self-compassion is you take that compassion that you so freely give to other people and you turn just a little bit of that on yourself, right? And so you start to walk yourself through, hey, I don't need to feel shame and guilt about this. This was a really difficult situation, right? I am at the absolute edge of what I can possibly handle as a human and as a mom. And that's why this is happening. So let me be kind to myself. Let me ask myself, and this goes into another strategy, right? Where we give ourselves compassion and then we want to engage with the rage, right? We don't want to deny it. We don't want to invalidate it. We want to say to ourselves, oh, this is happening for a reason. Let me try to figure out what's going on here so that maybe I can get to a solution. So let's say it's the situation where the kids are late for the bus and then you have to drive them to school and then you're late for work and you have a partner and your partner's hanging out at home, taking a super long shower in the morning while you're running around trying to get everything ready. Then the solution could be there, right? Let's bring your partner in, be like, okay, this morning routine doesn't work for our family anymore. Like the bus schedule changed or my work schedule changed. Let's figure out what works so that we can take some of that pressure off system-wide, right? Things like that. So that's what we want to look at when we're looking at strategies is we want individual strategies. We want to start with some self-compassion and then we want to look at, okay, what else makes sense here? Let's engage with this rage. Let's ask this rage, why is it coming up? What does it need? And that's really where we want to go with that because everything, when we're talking about these violated expectations, when we were talking about violated expectations and compromised needs, we want to look at meeting those needs, right? So if there is an issue with sleep, right? If sleep deprivation is the issue, we want to look at, is there any way that we can help with sleep, right? Things like that. So we want to look at what is specifically bringing up the rage. We learn that from engaging with the rage, and then we can customize the interventions to then meet those needs and maybe meet some of those expectations.
Yeah, that all sounds relieving. If you can, it might not happen immediately, but if you can, with some time, even make a couple of small changes, any amount of relief is going to be for the greater good. This is going to be for the good of the mom who's suffering. And I really appreciate you talking about the system and that both parents, if there's two parents around, both engaging in supporting the system is helping the individual also. It's not just, I need more sleep and I need you to help me get more sleep. It's, I need more sleep because we need to function better, all of us.
That is exactly right. And that framing is so critically important
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't put all of the responsibility on the mother, because all
Mm-hmm.
of that responsibility does not belong on the mother, because this is
No.
a family that we are working to take care of together.
Right.
And we can also get creative here too, right? Like we can look beyond the family system for that support. If clients are willing and interested, I highly recommend support groups.
Right.
Just here, whether they be in person or online, it doesn't matter. Just hearing that there are other moms that are going through the same things that you're going through and hearing about solutions that they might have come up with.
Right.
So I know when we're specifically talking about logistical things, like we're recording this in June, where summer schedules have descended upon us and are
Mm-hmm.
creating chaos in so
Right.
many households, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Just this
so,
morning. Yeah.
yes. And so, if within your household there isn't, or there's a struggle to find an equitable solution with things like camp pickup and drop off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look beyond your household, right? Look to your community. Do you have a good friend with kids
Mm-hmm.
going to the same camp? Can you make a friend whose kids are going to the same, so that somebody does drop off and somebody does pick up, right? Or somebody does all of it one week and then all of it the next week, right? So looking at your community also is a great place to look for support, because as you mentioned, we're not designed to do this alone. We aren't even designed to do this as the way most of us live in nuclear families. We're designed to raise children in communities.
Right.
That's how we are designed as humans. And so the more we can get back to that, the more that helps with things like mom rage, because it relieves this pressure that then leads to the buildup, that then leads to the explosion, right? So it's
Right.
all recognizing all of this connectedness is so important too. And again, it's such a big relief when moms hear this, oh, this isn't just me,
Yeah.
and there's solutions. And
Yes.
also, it doesn't have to be 100% all of the time, right? Like,
Right.
this is an area of specialization for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is still something that comes up for me because I'm human.
Right.
And there are things that are overwhelming sometimes, right? And it's
Absolutely.
what's also important. This is another strategy that I teach clients all of the time, and that I teach therapists too, is the idea of rupture and repair, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you have moments where you're not the parent that you wanted to be and you're feeling some anger and rage and you yell or whatever the case might be, right? Or you say things that you wish you hadn't said, to then be able to go to your child and say, I realize that I made a mistake. I did
Mm-hmm.
something that I am not proud of, and I'm sorry, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on doing better. And then if you can even tell them how you're working on it and how you're working to do better, that is so much more valuable than perfect parenting, which, first of all,
Yes.
does not exist.
Yep.
And
No.
then what you're teaching your children is you're teaching them, like, oh, we can make mistakes, take responsibility, and then
Mm-hmm.
work to do better. That is,
Mm-hmm.
I actually refer to that as that's a gift. That is a
Yeah.
gift. That type of modeling is a
Yes.
gift that you are giving to your child. And it is a truly beautiful and valuable gift to be able to show them
Yeah.
how to rupture and repair.
Yep.
And so that is another strategy that I use with clients all of the time. And also something that brings them big relief. It's, oh, I can mess up and then I can work on it and I can model that for my child. And it's, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what a wonderful thing to teach them. And when your children are old enough and you then see them engaging in that behavior,
Yeah.
that's something special, right?
Totally. Yeah.
It really is. There's so much of what we've talked about today are really some of the really the most challenging parts of parenting. But
Mm-hmm.
when you see some modeling that you've done through really difficult situations, like
Yes.
feeling anger and rage, and
Yes.
then you see your children using those tools, like maybe with their sibling that they
Yep.
might have shown some rage to,
Maybe. Yeah.
maybe totally hypothetical, but does happen. That is really, those are the parenting moments where it's like,
Oh, cool.
that's where you can then show yourself some real compassion, be like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm doing okay. I'm doing my
Yeah.
best, and maybe it's actually working out. I'm doing
Yeah,
all right.
for sure. And it normalizes that we all make mistakes. There's so many great parts of that. And in some way, the rupture and repair is the self compassion that we're trying to do with ourselves also. So all of that is just so important. And this has been such a great discussion. I know so many people are going to, one, be able to resonate from it, two, be able to learn from it, and three, be able to use what they're learning here, both in their life and with other people. What are some, what are the things you want to wrap up on today?
I would really love it if your listeners could remember when they're thinking, when they're experiencing mom rage or when they're thinking about mom rage, that truly it's not a meltdown, it's a message.
Mm,
And so engage with that rage, figure out what it's trying to tell you, figure out what it's trying to express that it needs, right? Mom rage can really be a catalyst for positive change, but we have to work with it and not deny it in order to be able to get to that place of positive change. And then the other piece of it, and I hope we contributed this today, is don't be afraid to talk about it.
right.
Bring this into the light. This is such a common experience and it is such a challenging experience. But then when we
Right.
talk about it with other people, we recognize, oh, it's not just me.
Right.
And that is so powerful to know that you're not alone in these challenging and hard places in parenting. And so that is what I hope your listeners can take away from today and from our conversation.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. And what I think will be to give hope and maybe a little life raft to people who are going through this, who can hear what you've said and know that they can feel better and get back to being the kind of mom and parent they want to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for all of the work that you do in this space and for all of the light that you bring to these really challenging topics. I think that really helps with the shame and guilt and helps us to feel not alone and helps us to recognize like, hey, I know this sounds cheesy, but I'm going there anyway. We're all in this together. And the more that we can help each other out, the better this gets. And so it is possible. And I'll throw this out there if your listeners are interested in this topic and in the work that I do. I do keep my social media, my Instagram specifically updated with research that I'm doing on mom rage and with
Great.
trainings that I'm doing on mom rage. And that's really where I keep my updated content on mom rage is on my Instagram. And I am open to conversation. So people can feel free to reach out to me at any time to get more information about the work that I do and around this topic. I am always happy to hear from people and to continue the conversation. So thank you again
Yeah.
for all that you do and for having me today. I'm so honored.
Thank you. As you heard from Nicole, you can stay connected with her and what she's offering on Instagram at therapist.mom.collective. And you can also find information on her website, nicolemcnellis.com. And those will also be linked in our show notes. Please share this episode. This is such an important one. And even if you're not sure if somebody you know has dealt with mom rage before, they might have. It could be useful, even if they didn't maybe experience it to the full extent that you did. Or if you think this just could help normalize how somebody is feeling, please share the episode. When you share this, it also helps reduce the shame and stigma associated with things like mom rage and perinatal mental health conditions in general. And you can share this from where you're listening to this podcast right now, whether it's on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast, or on YouTube. Just click that share button and send away. And as usual, I thank you so much for being here. Until next time.